Well, former Walt Disney World president Josh Valley has just shown us everything wrong with the modern Disney company. He suggests that guests don't have enough information to judge the decisions that Disney makes because Disney knows more than you. So let's talk about it today, Vash, on That Park Place. Look, Jeff Vale, I think we settled on Valley as the way to pronounce it, right?
I think so, yes.
Okay, whatever. We're going to say Valley. If it's Vale, then I don't really care because you know what? I could be wrong because Disney knows more than me. They know how to pronounce it. So let's talk about what he said here. Former Walt Disney World president Jeff Valley offered a remarkable defense of controversial leadership decisions as he reflected on his 36 years at the Walt Disney Company, suggesting that people criticizing those decisions simply may not possess the information available to Disney executives. In an interview with the Orlando Business Journal following his retirement, Valley discussed the realities of leadership and acknowledged that people will inevitably disagree with decisions made by those in charge. His explanation for that disagreement, however, is where things get interesting. He said, quote, "Not everyone is always going to agree with the decisions that you make, but you have to understand that there's information they don't have that we do. That's important," he said, according to the quote highlighted by Boardwalk Times. That's certainly one way to look at it, Vash.
It is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, another might be that Disney's paying customers sometimes know exactly what they like, what they dislike, and what they're willing to spend their money on, you know, and maybe we shouldn't be so dismissive of that. Vash, this is what a tone deaf statement made by a tone deaf man who presided over one of the worst periods in Walt Disney World history.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the losses just that have been mounted within these last 10 years is just incredible when you look at it. It is just very, very enlightening. How many decisions have been made, and especially by the people in charge of this famous, amazing, beloved Walt Disney World Resort right here. Look, and we've heard from both Hugh Johnston and also too from Josh D'Amaro and some others in the past, right? How they have, forecasting, projections, spreadsheets, everything to tell them whether or not their, investments are going to be, the bee's knees, especially long term and everything like that. But the danger here is that you are essentially making short term decisions, right? That will affect the future of Walt Disney World from here until infinitum. And you're doing it based off of spreadsheet data, but not necessarily examining, on a per project basis, what does that mean when you upend the Rivers of America? What does that mean for a guest when you actually take out something like Jim Henson's last amazing work in Muppet Vision 3D? What effect does that have on the guest? There are so many things that don't wind up on a spreadsheet that these executives have convinced themselves that they are doing the absolute right thing and that these things had to go. And, obviously, we're not getting the ROI from this particular area, or we're not getting, we have these maintenance obligations with Rivers of America and Liberty Bell that we have to go ahead and set aside. So this is all progress, you see, and it's like this is just not what really founded the Walt Disney Company and its amazing products like Disneyland, for example. Walt didn't do that. He didn't look at spreadsheets. He looked at feel, guest satisfaction, how people would actually take, I don't know, a castle at the end of a, small town main street, that kind of thing.
Well, that's the thing here, Vash, is the Disney company now is algorithm driven. It's all driven by spreadsheets and consumer data. And you're right. That is a complete, it is, one might say it's the antithesis of Walt's dream. And maybe this person might say it.
And Dreamer's Point is the antithesis of the idea that Walt had this incredible optimism and hope for the future, that if we all work together and we all dream together, we could build the impossible and make it our reality.
Exactly. So basically, so Disney credits him with Tron Light Cycle, Jeff Valley, with Tron Light Cycle Run, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, Tiana's Bayou Adventure, the Reimagined Test Track, Journey of Water, and the Country Bear Musical Jamboree. And that's exactly why his comments deserve scrutiny. So basically what he's saying here is Disney knows better than you. Now, obviously, there's a reasonable point here. Executives have access to information that customers don't, and Disney leadership can see attendance figures, guest surveys, financial projections, operating expenses, attraction capacity, maintenance costs, demographic information, and countless other pieces of internal data that the average person visiting Magic Kingdom doesn't ever see. But Having more data does not automatically make your decision correct. More importantly, it doesn't invalidate the response of the customer. If Disney decides that a change makes sense based on internal data and its customers respond by rejecting that change, the customer is not wrong because they didn't have access to the spreadsheets, Vash. The customers who you have to convince. Yeah, go ahead.
No, absolutely. The customer is who you have to convince, and in the context of something like Tion's Bio Adventure, right? We know for a fact that the Brer Rabbit, Brer Bear, Brer Fox, and all of that that merchandise associated with Splash Mountain used to move, used to sell. Going into previously the what would it be, the Briar Patch, Laughing Place, whatever you want to call it, the shops that can be found within the proximity of Splash Mountain before it was taken over by the Critter Club and all of that. We know that what was in there was Splash Mountain merchandise. It didn't have to be augmented by any outside, IP or franchises or whatever. They just sold Splash Mountain and it moved. We also know, just because of our, because we have two eyes, is that they have whittled away at some of that merchandise that they actually crafted for Tion's Bio Adventure back in the day. It doesn't move. It doesn't sell. It wasn't a hit franchise, and yet they went forward with it. So even with all of the data available to you, you can still make objectively wrong decisions. And maybe, in fact, when it comes to Tion's Bio Adventure, it wasn't simply motivated by those spreadsheets, but there should have been executives telling them, hey, look, listen, do not do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's look at some of Valley's more controversial decisions. The statement, whether he's intending it that way or not, encapsulates the attitude that's frustrated Disney parks for years. We understand why we're doing this and you don't, but guests don't need to understand that. Remember Genie Plus? Disney launched Genie Plus at Walt Disney World in October 2021, replacing the previously included FastPass Plus system with a service that charged guests for access to Lightning Lane entrances. Certain highly demanded attractions could even require separate. We all know this, right? Guests nevertheless understood the part that mattered to them. Something previously so Disney undoubtedly had plenty of information that guests didn't have when it made that decision, Vash. But guests understood that something previously included with their increasingly expensive Disney World vacation had been replaced by another opportunity for Disney to reach into their wallets, and they don't like it. Disney had to overhaul the system repeatedly. There were theme park reservations, another pandemic-era creation that survived long after Walt Disney World reopened. Eventually, Disney eliminated reservation requirements for date-based tickets, although reservations can still be required for certain other admission types like annual passes. Again, perhaps Disney possessed mountains of internal information supporting every iteration of this. Guests were still able to say, no, we don't like this. The Galactic Star Cruiser. Probably the most devastating rebuttal to the idea that access to superior internal information produces superior decisions is the Star Cruiser MASH. The opened in March 2022, closed in September 2023. Disney had the Imagineers, the market research, the financial models, and access to arguably at the time the most valuable entertainment IP in modern history. Disney possessed a lot more information about Galactic Star Cruiser than customers that it hoped would purchase for the experience. Customers, of course, had something even more important, their wallets. And ultimately, they got the final vote. The Galactic Star Cruiser shut its airlock forever just 19 months after opening because that's how consumer business works. We don't need Disney's permission to hate something. Disney demolished Splash Mountain, replaced it with Tiana's Bio Adventure. That was Jeff Valley. The company permanently closed Rivers of America, Tom Sawyer Island, the Liberty Square Riverboat in 2025 to make way for a Cars-themed expansion that nobody needs. Muppet Vision 3D closed for a Monsters, Inc. expansion that nobody asked for. Disney executives may have had very good business reasons for every one of these decisions, Vash, but that doesn't mean the guests who hated them were just uninformed rubes who simply couldn't comprehend Disney's grand plan. Perhaps some guests understood the trade-off perfectly well and still thought that Disney made the wrong decision, heaven forbid. That's the possibility Valley's statement seems to overlook here. The customer, remember here, and this is the point that I really wanted to make in this article, the customer has information that Disney doesn't. And that's the delicious irony of this situation, because Disney possesses information that guests don't have, but guests also possess one piece of information that Disney executives can never dictate whether or not they want to buy. Spreadsheet cannot make someone love an attraction. Guest survey data can't make someone feel nostalgic for a place they never wanted, A demographic study can't force someone to believe that the latest IP-driven attraction is better than the experience that Disney demolished to build it. And an executive can't explain someone into believing they're receiving good value for their money. Disney can spend years researching a decision, millions developing it, and produce a 100-page presentation explaining why it makes perfect strategic sense. And the guest can still look at it and say, no, that is the marketplace. And that's the reality that something like this is just completely pushing away, right?
Absolutely correct. 100% right there. There are just things that don't end up on a spreadsheet. And like you said, the consumer is always right. And obviously, you have to give consumers a product that is worth paying for. When you actually jack up the price to the extent they have and get rid of those classic attractions that maybe people wanted to enjoy with their kids, like they did when they were children, well, that becomes a sticking point, an issue, a problem, a friction point that maybe consumers, don't actually opt in to your resort stay. It's very interesting, Marvin, because it's just the Rivers of America. I understand it from a spreadsheet's perspective. I get it. It costs you money. It costs you money to maintain the river. It costs you money to maintain Tom Sawyer's Island. You can't sell lightning on it. Obviously, Liberty Bell. Right, it's an old steam paddle wheeler, right? There's a significant cost associated with that. I get that, I understand that. However, it's for those particular items, like the Rivers of America, like Tom Sawyer's Island, like Liberty Bell, why people value the Magic Kingdom above all else, or at least partially, right? And why they actually went to Walt Disney World. It wasn't just about extracting cash and, looking towards ROI, and certainly that's the calculation that they made when installing things like Cars Land and Villains Land. They wanted to sell that Lightning Lane, they wanted to sell that merch and all of that. But if you don't provide them that atmosphere, those intangible, let's say, amazing experiences like Rivers of America, then why necessarily go to Walt Disney World at all? They've lost that in their equation. They've lost that in their algorithm, their data, and so forth, as you bring out beautifully, Marvin. That it's just, data. Obviously, that can fill out your worldview, and that can obviously be a very important decision making, but it can also lead you astray as well.
100%. You are totally right. And that is the problem. When you are unable, it's like the Lego movie, right? Where it's like when you're unable to look beyond the instructions and be able to actually create with your imagination and be able to create something spectacular, you're always going to be limited. You're always going to be on rails. And that's the thing. Nobody at the Disney company is imagining anything anymore. They're not trying to think outside the box. They're thinking inside the box. The box is the data that they have, the data that they drive this entire company. That is what the company that has an entire division, Vash, with the word imagine in their title. I saw some merchandise this past week while I was at Disney Springs that was horrifying. Like literally their annual pass holder shirt is just a plain black t-shirt with the words Walt Disney World annual pass holder on them. That's it.
I think I saw some photo.
Yeah, it was a backpack, just a plain yellow backpack that just had the Walt Disney World logo on it. That's it.
It's they're getting lazier, right? And they're putting in less effort, because effort obviously costs them money, costs them resources, and so forth. So if they can get away with offering less, charging more, that is exactly what they'll do. And unfortunately, we've seen that when it comes to, even the quality of the products that we're seeing. Look at Lakeshore Lodge, right? That thing is a joke. Has no character whatsoever. Has no theming. We picked it apart to here to Kingdom Come. But there's a reason for it, because Walt Disney World, Disney themselves set a standard, and they established that standard over decades, over 70 years. And slowly, at least with this management team, it is upending all of that. We're replacing classic attractions with inferior replacements. We are, diminishing certain things that we used to love, certain aspects that we used to love about this amazing place. We are filling in these holes with really terrible corporate slop, like Lakeshore Lodge, for example, or like the Polynesian TVC tower right there. It's just, it's awful. But on a spreadsheet, hey, it looks great, looks awesome, looks fantastic. But what is the impression, Marvin, that you take away from that from a consumer's perspective? It's like, do I necessarily want to come here again? It's a good question.
Was it worth the money? That's the thing, is the value is something that, you have to see if you're actually giving. And for a lot of people that have come here for years, they know what they lost. And so it's hard to attribute that value. Here, take a look at this. This is the t-shirt and hat that I saw. How imaginative.
Yeah, the hat's probably $30 and the t-shirt's probably $40.
Probably. There you go. Walt Disney World. How about a little bit of like black outlining on the thing so it doesn't like just blend into the yellow? Like that looks like nothing. I could not believe what I was seeing with how little imagination is put into anything that they do. Look at what they did to World of Disney in general when they took this whimsical, magical store, this like place where you would walk in and you'd see the characters on the walls and like the big statues they had, and you'd be like, wow, I can't believe this place exists in the world. Like, this is incredible. And now it just looks like a really nice Target. It's like, they made Communicore Hall, which was supposed to be this massive festival center and show building, and it's a cafeteria at an airport. Like, there's just nothing anymore. There's none of the imagination. There's none of the whimsy. There's none of the spirit that used to be put into these things, from people, from legendary Imagineers, from Tony Baxter and all of these others. Now we've got.
And so what we've tried to do is really bring that shape language from the architecture. But like what we love to talk about at WDI is shape language. And we often refer to shape language.
There's such iconic shape language in Spaceship Reverie Attraction. We really wanted to make sure that we fused to that throughout the space.
Like, that's what we've got now. And that's who's making these decisions. And we've got, instead of having a dreamer like Walt Disney, and to a lesser extent, Michael Eisner, he was a dreamer too. He was a guy who really valued creativity. And for what creativity he lacked, he leaned on the actual creatives who did have it, who could create things like Disney's MGM Studios and stuff like that. Now we have corporate bean counters. That's the people that Bob Iger has assembled. And nobody cares about everyone's a VIP anymore. Nobody cares about any of it. And now it's just the mentality of, well, we're Disney and we know more than you. And because of that, you can go float if you don't like it, because you're going to come anyway because it's Disney. Well, we're seeing that that's not really the way it works anymore. And, when I see Jeff Valley say something as tone deaf as this, my only thought is,
you are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity.
Except they don't pity him. Any closing thoughts on this one, Vash?
No, it is the hubris, right? The arrogance that we have seen, especially from the Bob Iger era, really on display. And maybe perhaps, that's why Jeff Valley is being, I don't want to say pushed out, but maybe retiring, perhaps.
Yeah,
right.
Not
and
giving the job that he wanted.
Exactly, right. And maybe that mentality is what has kind of, it's demonstrable. It's certainly what's led Walt Disney World in this position, but perhaps that did, like you said, upend his prospects of becoming chairman of the experiences division right there, which, hey, look, Joe Scott coming in. Hopefully we get a change in the leadership mindset right here. We are, maybe coming into an era that's a little bit more consumer or guest focused right there, especially if Thomas Moslem, who used to be the head of the Disney Cruise Line, is wanting to adapt some of that philosophy for the entire experiences unit. That'd be great. That'd be fantastic. That'd be awesome. But when hearing comments like this, and especially with the culture that has been cultivated at Walt Disney World, do we believe things will change? I'm not entirely convinced. Not yet.
Well, guys, just remember, if you like this video, that's awesome. But if you didn't like it, before you leave a nasty comment, just remember that we here at That Park Place have information that you don't.
Thanks for watching That Park Place News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.